Pinchas Blitt was born in Kortelisy, Poland, now Ukraine, in 1931-32 approximately. Pinchas and his family immigrated to Canada in 1948 and settled in Montreal, where he attended Teachers College and law school. In addition to a long career as a lawyer, Pinchas was involved in the Yiddish Theater community in Montreal for many years. He has 3 children. He lives in Montreal with his life partner, Giselle. About a promise of sweet tea. A Jewish community in pre-war Eastern Europe comes alive in this vividly told story of a childhood interrupted by the Holocaust. In his wry and evocative prose, Pinchas Blitt conjures the humble village of Kortelisy in the backwoods of Western Ukraine, where he is surrounded by colorful characters and the rich language and traditions of his ancestors. Young Pinchas is beset by fears of Cossacks and wolves, and the local anti-Semitic children who taunt him for being a Jew. But he finds belonging with his family and in Jewish texts and prayers. When the Soviets invade, Pinchas quickly adapts, but when the Nazis arrive, his beloved village comes under attack, and he and his family must flee and find refuge in the forest. A precarious existence on the run begins, brings Pinchas face to face with his own mortality and faith, and with a sense of dislocation that will accompany him throughout his life.
Well, first of all, it's a very tiny part of the Holocaust as a whole. You know, I'm not writing about the Holocaust. I'm just writing about a small, little, insignificant village where the Jewish people were led like lamb to the slaughter. I think maybe it should be an example that there should have been more resistance, I feel, you know, like Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. But Kortelisy, people, men, women, and children, they didn't know what to do. There was no leadership. There was nothing to guide them. They just died. At one point, my father's lined up to be shot, and he speaks to the killers because he knew those guys. He worked with them. He traded with them. He dealt with them. He knew them all very well. So he says to them, "Why do you want to kill us here on the street? We'll work like brothers. We'll walk to the burial place. It'll save you a job, you know." Well, I thought to myself, maybe he wasn't kidding. He really inadvertently cooperated with his killers. And this is, I'm afraid to say it, but I have to say that the ways that they were helpless. There was nothing to guide them. The resistance was so low, hardly any resistance, and I feel sad about it. So maybe this book will teach us a lesson that we should not accept. We should not accept all the talk, the anti-Semitic pronouncements. We should fight back and tell them off and tell them exactly how we feel about them.
How did you survive the war?
Well, I'll tell you, pure luck. Pure luck. I'll give you an example. The first time the Germans came and did the killing was, we stayed at my grandparents', my father's parents, at their home overnight. For some reason, we lived at we were the first house in the village as you come from the west. And my grandparents lived on the square right next to the church, and this was at the very end of the village. And we decided to stay overnight with my grandparents overnight. And in the very early morning, there was knocking. Now, first of all, there were two entrances to the house, And as you walk into a little foyer, and then there was a door that led to the actual dwelling, to the apartment. And there was on the outside, knocking on one of the entrances, Aufmachen, Aufmachen. Well, we knew it wasn't there were not guests coming for breakfast, you know. So we were able to run out from the main bedroom into this little foyer and run out through the back door, through the other back door. And I mean, the Germans were not smart enough or what have you to control the other door as well. And we managed to escape. One thing. And another situation, well, they were shooting after us and they missed us. It's not that we were so smart. My father was determined to survive. He never lost hope. He never gave up. My mother would act hysterically about things. She didn't take it too well, and she never thought that we'll survive the war. But my father, this is where it comes to promise of sweet tea. My father kept on telling me, because he knew I loved sweet tea, especially cold sweet tea at room temperature. And I was wake up in the middle of the night having sweet tea, and it was always ready for me there. And my father didn't speak about whether or not we're going to survive. We're definitely going to survive. There was no question in his mind. And he said, but now, when the war is gone, we go to America. He had certain rights in America because of his father's sojourns there. And you'll have all the sweet tea you want. And that was the promise my father made. But he never said, you'll survive, don't worry. You know, he knew we were going to survive. And that's my dad, you know.
In the book, you discuss an older woman who was the village healer, Dvoria the healer. You write movingly how she always dressed in black, but that she had prepared beautiful and expensive shrouds for when she died. I want to read this part from the book to give viewers a sense of the way you write about these people from your childhood. One day, a group of people, maybe even neighbors, supposedly decent, God-fearing people who believed they were doing God's work, but who, in their love of God, hated Jews, entered the home of the healer, Dvorah, and her family, and just took everything, including her precious shrouds. Death had never been Dvorah's fear. She knew that there was a much better world after death. Her fear was being buried without her precious shrouds. Her fear was the embarrassment of having to stand before the Almighty like a pauper in her torn and shabby street clothing. Poor Dvorah, her anxiety of being deprived of her shrouds would be short-lived. You write that not long after that, the Germans arrived. They killed 15 Jews, and you believe this is when Dvorah and her family were also murdered. You write, she was buried without her shrouds in an unmarked grave with the other murdered victims. I hope the Almighty received Dvorah's bullet-ridden body in her modest and torn street clothing, accepted her spirit, and recognized her good and generous soul, even without her proper shrouds. She had spent more money, time, and effort on her shrouds and preparations for the world to come than she had on this world, her worldly clothing, and her worldly needs. And she had loved her young patients and always wanted to make them happy, sharing the very little she had. Hopefully, the Almighty understood that she had done everything in her power to make a dignified entrance and not to be an embarrassment when appearing before him. You bring out the inner life of the people in the book. How important was it to you to have readers connect with the people and get a sense of what they were like?
It was a village, a community that had a soul, that had a life. They had everything that a Jew that had followed the faith needed. They had a mikveh, they had a cheder, they had a melamed, the shoichet, the teacher. They had a synagogue. They had everything that a Jew needed, and they lived together as a community. They acted as a community. There was no friction. The only time that the friction would always be settled is on Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah, the day when Jews dance with the Torah and sometimes get a bit begeliffen, a little bit drunk. And when they get drunk on Simchas Torah, all the rage comes out and all the conflict that existed during the year between members of the community and sometimes ended up in a fist fight. But yet it was a community that worked together, lived together.
In a chapter called At Home in Kortelisy, you describe a village that consisted of different communities, each with their traditions, that lived in relative harmony until the Germans arrived. Can you describe what this harmony looked like and how you experienced it?
The Ukrainian Christians, they needed the Jews, and the Jews needed the Ukrainian Christians to survive. Like my grandfather, Mayor, my father's father, couldn't have survived without the Christians because he had a little business, and his business was he bought those huge brushes that purify the wool. The Ukrainians would shear their sheep annually, and then they would bring the wool. They would bring the wool to be purified at my grandfather's place, and he was paid to do it. My other grandfather had a smithy, and the Ukrainians had horses, and they had wagons and plows, and they would always come to my grandfather to repair those things. My father dealt with them. He was like a Ukrainian in many ways. My father was a soicher. He was a merchant. He dealt with them, selling horses, cows, buying horses and selling cows. He would trade with them. He moved from one village to another and buying stuff and selling stuff to them. So we lived as a unit. It was one dependent on the other one. Yeah.
Yeah, you describe vivid characters, Jewish and non-Jewish, from your hometown. Can you describe one or two of these people, and what about them sticks with you? What do you feel are the values and beliefs they held that you would like to carry forward in telling their stories?
Well, the thing is this, part of their faith was the Jews are Christ killers. They couldn't forget that. They always reminded us that we killed Christ, their God. And they knew that until Jews become Christians, they will have to suffer, and they'll have to take the punishment, and that it was God's punishment, and so on. But the Ukrainian Christians didn't kill us. They didn't want to kill us. We were lived together. We were neighbors. My parents had some of their closest friends, like the Boyko family. The Boyko family was a very close family that lived outside the village. They had a huge orchard of fruits and a garden with vegetables, and we'd always visit them. And I particularly liked to drink their kvass, and they were friends, and we never thought of them as goyim or Christians, but as close friends. So we lived together in harmony, you know. What happened later during the German occupation? Of course, there were the Germans named policemen, and the policemen were not very friendly. They were killers, and as a kid, I used to get all sorts of treatment that wasn't very nice, of course. But they believed in their Christian God, and they thought we were different, and that therefore they were taunt us and threaten us, and this thing also to things. I don't know how they learned those things about Jews, and that we had the Jew test, and we would be called ge, because there are lots of G's in the Yiddish language, and until the Russians came, ge was not. There was no ge in the Ukrainian language. There was no hard G in the Ukrainian language, but in the Yiddish language there was lots of them, and we were different in many ways. So the difference was sometimes hurtful.
Between the start of the war and when the Germans entered, it was under your village was under the control of the Soviets.
Well, the Soviets, yeah.
There was Soviet propaganda. How successful was it in your case, and how did you embrace? You mentioned you embraced Comrade Stalin and how you acted as a child under that regime.
Yeah, well, in 1939, by the German-Soviet plot, they attacked Poland, and we ended up under the Russian or Soviet regime. And the Soviets came, well, as a kid, I didn't know what was happening really, but Stalin was loved by all, including me. I loved Stalin with a passion. He was my friend. He was my savior. He did everything for me, and it didn't take much to make a child of Kortelisy happy. Just a little roll, a white bread, anything was precious. So I remember reading the poems about Stalin and in Ukrainian and in I don't know, but I never became a communist. It reached the point, of course, right away when I reached a certain age. We knew exactly what Stalin was, and Stalin was not somebody I continued to love, but I loved him when I was a child. The propaganda was there. I mean, we all praised Stalin. We all loved. He was our leader. That's right.
Well done propaganda. You talk about your father's belief that he was saved by miracles and angels, but you, even as a young child, had your doubts. Can you talk about how your faith changed over the war and how it affected your relationship with your father?
I had no doubt, but the thing is that even in my book, when I was a child, I thought I would give God from time to time a dig. After all, I was a graduate of the Cheder. I lived in the religious community, and notwithstanding Stalin, my faith was there. I was naive. I couldn't see the difference between, as I say in my book, between the Stalin's constitution and the sages of our father. To me, they were both acceptable at the same time. I had no problem. As a child, I give God a dig, especially when I saw the woman die with her triplets. I call him a trickster. I call him names. When they come and they kill babies, and the Germans say, why are they killing? Why are we the victims? Where's God? Where's God? I ask, where's God? But my faith was there because I was raised this way. I was raised as a child, when certain prayers had to be said, and I didn't say that, and I lied. That was a horrible situation I felt when the rabbi asked me if I said this prayer on a Saturday afternoon, and I lied. I said yes. And the rabbi said, well, I can see on your face that you didn't, and I can read your face. And I believe that rabbis could read my face and tell me whether I lied or I told the truth. So I came from a very extremely religious, not fanatic, so to speak, not the Chabad or Hasidim, but religious, God-fearing Jews. That's where I was raised.
Right.
It took a long time to be able to have some doubts about God. But as a kid, even I gave God a dig from time to time, especially when that woman and after she lost her husband and her son that were killed in the marshes. And I thought to myself, well, she's pregnant now and she's giving birth to at least two kids, two babies to name after her husband and her lost child who were killed. So what happened instead? He kills the triplets and he kills the mother. What kind of a God is that? Where's justice?
Yeah, in the intro of your book, writer David Roskies wrote, "These memoirs are so full of life, of dialogue, of laughter through tears, that they might easily belong in the Yiddish Theater, where I've seen you many times. Indeed, you were involved in Yiddish Theater for many years, and your memoir is full of humorous anecdotes and descriptions. I've enjoyed watching you in the Yiddish Theater, many, many shows, Lies My Father Told Me, and so many others, the Wiseman of Helm before I was in it years later. Can you speak more about the role that theater and humor have played in your life?"
Well, theater, even with in the Russian school, we used to have around Christmas time and with Santa Claus, but we called him Ded Moroz, Father Frost, and he would bring gifts for the children, the gifts, and we'd have performances, and I would participate, and I loved it. I loved to sing. I loved to dance. I would do the Kozatsky. So from very childhood, and mimicking was part of the deal. I love to mimic. Older people, adults and so on. And I used to, of course, I saw a lot of Yiddish theater with Maurice Schwartz when he visited Montreal. I saw Hebrew theater, the Bima. I loved the theater, and there was one day I was studying for my bar exams. And he came in, we talked a little bit, and he was ready to leave. I said, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going for a rehearsal." I say, "What for rehearsal?" I said, I'm taking part in the play, Dora Wasserman. And I saw a play before, Hannah Senish, the Dora Wasserman. I knew who she was, and I said, well, I'd like you to take a break maybe, and you studied for the bar exams yourself, so you know what it means.
I also studied for those bar exams and took breaks being involved in theater. And I was in the Yiddish Theater when Brian Wasserman was running it. I think us lawyers like to perform a bit,
Anyway, so what I did was I joined him, and there Dora was rehearsing those Große Gewinns, the Shalom Aleicham's, the lottery. And she had one part that wasn't filled, and that's the part of the matchmaker. And I read it, and she liked it. And she's really a horrible flatterer. She didn't have to flatter me, and I said, "Okay, I'll play the part." But I couldn't do both, so I deferred the bar exams for 6 months.
Well, you became a lawyer and a very, very well-known actor in Montreal. I always enjoyed watching you on stage.
Thank you. So I deferred the bar exams for 6 months, and I was in the play. And then when the play was over, I was studying for the bar exam, and I went to Quebec City, where I had to write my bar exams, and I did okay. I passed it. And it was difficult for me to study law. It was we had such bright students in my class. I mean, they all became, senators, politicians, and you remember Yonah Goldstein. He was a senator. Fortier, Don Johnston. They were all very successful.
A lot of fun shows you were in. A lot of fun shows. I remember seeing you in many. And I mean, one that I could visually see you right now with the little boy.
Oh yes,
now. Why is my father told me?
This was outside the theater, and I became sick suddenly. I had a kidney problem, and I ended up in the hospital in the middle of a play. And there I am lying on the gurney. I'm lying on the gurney in the hospital. I'm in terrible pain. The young doctor tells the nurse, give him something for his pain. It doesn't help. I'm pain. And who should come in to visit? Dora Wasserman and Shirley Gonsher.
Huh?
And they came in and they said, and Dora is walking around me like a coffus around my gurney there and talking to herself. Will he be able to perform? Will he be able to perform? Will he be able to perform? And when she left, the young doctor comes over to me and said, tell me, what do you do in life? He was disappointed, and I told him that perform means doing theater.
Yeah, I remember Dora well because my kids were in No More Raisins, No More Almonds. They were all in No More Raisins, No More Almonds.
Yeah, that's Batya Batman's.
Yeah, and all my children were in that play. There were several times they performed it, and Dora was around. Brian, of course, was directing. It was a great experience. We traveled all over the place with that play, talking about the Holocaust and the horse again.
Yeah, it was a good play. It was nice. It was
a good educational play. We went to Virginia Beach. People didn't know, many of the people had never even knew what a Jew was there. And the kids were explaining to them, all about the play and what it's about and what it means and what the Holocaust was. So it was a very educational and a great experience for all of my children. And my daughter-in-law. They were all in the show. As a matter of fact, my son and my daughter-in-law met in that play and they got married. They met in the Yiddish Theater.
Oh, yes, there were quite a few marriages that came up from the Yiddish Theater.
Yeah. So, let's see. As one of only two remaining survivors from your village, the other being your brother.
Yeah, my brother lives in Israel.
What is it you would like people to know about and think of when they think of your village?
It was a village that was of innocent people destroyed. There was pure evil exercised on them. And I only hope that they were good. I mean, there were good people, there were decent people, there were honest people, there were God-fearing people, and they were destroyed for no reason. They were just killed by an evil government. And the only thing is, I hope that this be a lesson to not to accept such atrocities in the future. I know they take place right now. There are some countries where others are being oppressed, even killed, and the world does, well, very little, almost nothing. And I thought that this would be an example, a lesson to the world that evil is evil, and they shouldn't be allowed, shouldn't be permitted. But yet, very little is being done to avoid those things. And there are countries in this world, members of the United Nations, members of the Security Council, who are oppressing others who are not like the majority, and even killing them, even now. So there was nothing was learned from, and anti-Semites continue to be anti-Semites. They deny the obvious, and something very effective should be done about it. But
well, we're going to have to keep on trying. This is obviously an issue that continues to plague our world, And it's our responsibility, each one of us, to do what we can and speak up to try to make it a better world. And what you've been doing here today, speaking as well as in your book and writing, is what hopefully will make a difference, one human being at a time, in educating that we're all here together, no matter our race, ethnic background, religion, level of observance, sexual orientation, or what. We're all people, and we should all be treated with respect and kindness. And that's what the message that you're sending loud and clear. So I want to thank you so much. Thank you for joining us and for writing this wonderful book.
Thanks for listening to me, and it's a pleasure meeting you. The last time I met the mayor was when I was 10, 11 years ago. It was in Kortelisy, the mayor of Kortelisy. I bumped into him as he was working in the fields. And at that time, they decided there was a decision to be made what to do with the Jews of Kortelisy. And the council wanted to send them out to a ghetto. They were started talking about ghettos. I didn't know what was ghetto. But I met the mayor as he was working in the field, and he took some grains and tested them, tasted them. I walked over to him, I started speaking to him, and I told him how the mayor was fighting for the Jews, and he was trying to help the Jews and preventing the council from a decision to kick them out and to throw them into a ghetto. I didn't know he was the mayor, but he knew me, he knew my father. And then he met my father and he told him what happened. So they had a good laugh. Anyways, I didn't take credit for eventually not expelling them because they found other ways of destroying the Jewish community.
Well, stay in good health. I want to see you at the theater. We're going to go back to doing theater now that things are in control. COVID controls are getting better. I know that the Siegel Center is up again and running, and Saint-Luc Theater is going to be up and running, and we hope to see you in our audience if we can't get you on the stage.